Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope you're doing well out there. If you guys could subscribe, that'd be great, and appreciate you stopping by. So the Miami Heat had their exit interviews this past week, and a lot of the players spoke, and we spoke earlier in the week about, what Tyler and Bam had to say. They're fascinating things, but I do want to dive into some of the other players because I think everybody's got some it's rare are the players on this team that don't have like an interesting story arc that we have to get into. And for Jaime Jaquez Jr., I don't know what to make of this collapse of a season that he had, but it was certainly interesting for a man I think everybody was super high on coming into this season, that this guy was going to come in here and build off of what he did, especially I think in the early portion of his rookie year. It just wasn't the case. I mean, this is one of those seasons that just went down as a complete disaster for him. And by the end of it, really was just getting very little playing time, which was, I think, pretty disappointing to Heat fans who were expecting this first-team all-rookie to, I don't know if make a leap is the case because he is 24 years old, but certainly not to be, stuck in the muck and be in a place where he was basically unplayable by the end of things. It was interesting just watching him this year because I felt like there wasn't a player clearer. You could just see the deflation of confidence go out of his eyes. Because I felt like watching Jaime Jaquez his rookie year is a guy that just felt like he did everything smooth and just never rushed anything, was playing at his own pace, and then could be burstful and make an impact without having the ball in his hands with his great cuts. And then when he did, he never just seemed to rush in the paint to make some right moves with footwork, and then also just didn't have a hesitancy to attack the paint. But this year, it felt like they almost suffocated him from the outside in because he said he was going to come in a much better shooter or work on being a better shooter, and it was a disaster this year. I mean, he just, and look, that was the book on him coming in, is that this was a guy who was not going to be able to shoot the basketball. It just wasn't his thing in college. He wasn't very good at it. He obviously is a 4-year player, which, I get the knock that it can have, but look, even with him being a 4-year player, there are differences. I don't think anybody looked at Jaime Jaquez Jr. and thought the guy was going to be a star. But there's a difference between being a star and being unplayable. It's not even like there was a serviceable place for him this year. And the other thing was, man, it just felt like last year, Eric Spoelstra threw Jaime Jaquez to the wolves when it came to defense. He'd be like, there's a game against LeBron, go defend him. There's a game against KD, go defend him. There's a game against Tatum, go defend him. And yeah, he'd take his licks, but he didn't look like he was backing down from the challenge. And this year just felt like he was scattered all over the place, and there just wasn't a lot of places to go. Obviously, if you talk about the impact that a Jimmy Butler situation had for him, probably one of the hardest guys it could be on was Jaime because it yo-yoed the role a little bit when you had in the starting lineup, out of the starting lineup, in the starting lineup, out of the starting lineup. So especially in those early goings where he'd be in and out before settling in, yeah, that could be a little bit tough on a player like him, but it was just ugly to watch, and it was tough to watch by the end of it, just because it just felt like you're like, what happened to the guy who felt like nothing was rushed, nothing backed him down, nothing was serious. Even in the playoff games last year against the Celtics, right? So much was made about the struggles that Tyler had. And I felt like even watching in those games, there weren't numbers that blew you away, but I think for anybody who watched those games, you were like, hey, I think this guy, he doesn't seem like he's fearing it. He feels like he's going at things and is making attacks and doing all right. And so, I think the thought on him was, yeah, he was going to be in a pretty good spot coming into this year. And it just wasn't. Now, to be fair to him, he was accountable. And Eric Spoelstra, I think, dressed it up even more than Jaime did, because Spo was like going through the litany of things that had gone wrong for Jaime this year. And, he said, he pointed out there was a lot of physical things that were a problem.
He'll work on everything, and he had a really good summer last summer. And then he sprained his ankle right before training camp. And then these are not excuses, but it led to some of the just inconsistency of his play or his role. The first time I thought he was started to play well after the Mexico City game, and then that led to 3 of his stomach, actually 4 of his stomach issues, and sometimes you just can't control that. But that was 3 or 4 instances where he was taken out of the lineup, and then 3 sprained ankles. So every time he started to get rhythm, one of those events would happen, and then as a ramp up coming back, the team would change, and we already had 4 or 5 different changes within the team anyway, and then his role would have to change, and that's a lot for a young player.
Yeah, the stomach thing was weird this year. He had multiple games miss of the stomach virus, as Spo pointed out. The Mexico City one was kind of crazy because obviously he was almost like the ambassador for that. Like, that game felt like he was the poster child for it. You mind you, this is a guy who was on the Rising Stars team, first team All-Rookie, dunked over Shaq last year, had the big Christmas game, seemed to have a bit of a flair for the moment. And I don't know, like, Jaime said some interesting things in his media day afterwards, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see how he pulls himself out of this, because, you could sit here and say, the stomach virus but dude, like, that was like, what, the 6th game of the season? You can't sit here and say, hey, 6 games in, you have a stomach issue and that derails you all of a sudden. You can't, you can't get back to where it was. I would say for him, the best part of the year, while all the Jimmy stuff was going on and before it was, before the complete lights were turned out on that era, was the start of that West Coast trip. He had a really, really good run of games for the Miami Heat. And I thought that was like, all right, this looks like the guy we're all familiar with. But then it kind of just went by slowly and idly by. It went away. And then, of course, in the midst of all of that, while he's having this good thing, they got to bring Jimmy back, and then they got to suspend Jimmy again. And it's like, so they were dealing with that as well, where it's like, oh yeah, he's starting to have success. And then all of a sudden, boom, Jimmy's back, so that's going to change his lineup role. And so I definitely could understand why that would affect him at certain points, but eventually, what's the word Spo uses? Clarity. Once clarity was there, and this is the thing that was weird about the team, is once there was clarity there, it's almost like the entire team felt like, all right, I don't know. It's like one of those things where the team felt like the burden was off of them and nobody was watching anymore. And it's almost like the light went out on the team for a little bit. It was so strange. But I will say this with the Jaime Jaquez thing is they need him, man. Like, they need to get this fixed with him. And I'm not talking about need it fixed to like get him back to being an asset or to get him back to being who, but they need to get him back to being a playable NBA player. And, he mentioned a couple of things that were interesting in his exit interview. And I thought one of them was that he's got to make, he said the term that, because he was asked about his physical well-being. And I will say, watching him this year, there were certain games where you just like watch and be like, man, Jaime, you're not even like jumping for a rebound. Like, what's going on? And so I don't know what that was. I don't know if it was physical or mental, because he made a couple of points. He said that the mental part of it is just as important, if not more, than the physical. Because Jaime last year, he always said, like, it was just basketball. Like, the game didn't feel too fast for him. He's just like this. And I get it. People scout you. They figure out your moves. They know how he's going to pivot. They know which way he's going to spin. They take that away. Boom. What are you going to do now? They basically dare you to shoot, which they're going to do next year right off the bat. They're not going to respect that from him. And I don't even know, like, what the way to go about that, because I don't know if Jaime Jaquez Jr. is ever going to be a good shooter. It's never really been in his repertoire. So that's going to be a fascinating thing to check out. But yeah, when you see some of the stuff that he can pull off in the paint, you're like, man, this is beautiful. He plays at his own. He has a relentlessness to his game too, of putbacks. And people always say, like, he's Jimmy light. Like, he emulated. Jimmy was his favorite player, and one of the things with Jimmy is like that no matter what was going on with his game, one of the things that's most impressive about Jimmy Butler is, even if his shot is dog bleep on a night, Jimmy Butler will his way to 16 points, even if it's on putbacks, free throws, steals into buckets. And I do think that, like, we saw elements of that to Jaime's game, and especially with that stuff around the rim of just having a relentlessness to putting the ball back. And yeah, he needs to find that, but he also made note of it that he was physically fine. It does feel like the mentality of it got to him. But he also said that he's going to look to work out with teammates this summer, and that he's got to make some changes. So you almost wonder, I don't want to accuse him of anything because I don't know, but you wonder if, like, maybe he didn't put in what he thought was the necessary work for this offseason. Like, yeah, he had the stint in Team USA, and so there was a little bit of that, but maybe there wasn't quite enough. Maybe he didn't go quite enough as it was. The little thing in Summer League, he looked really good in Summer League. But they gotta figure out how to get this right with him, and figure out what's going to work for him. Because yeah, I would say, like, physically, he should be able to hold up. I never thought Jaime Jaquez looks too small. He's not a small guy. Got a pretty stout build. This year was just crazy. He referred to it as humbling. Yeah, it was humbling. I think probably at times was probably depressing for him. And especially at, like, the end of the year, like, you saw, I don't know what to put into those, like, last games against the Wizards, because it's the Wizards. But, he was able to put up 41 points in a game, no small feat. I mean, that was, one of the best scoring performances of the year, even if it is against a young, spunky, terrible Wizards team. And he had that big fourth quarter against them too. So we know he can play the Wizards. We know that. This we know with Jaime Jaquez Jr. But I think that this is one of those where, man, it's a huge third year for him, because it's not like Nico. And one of the things when you're an older prospect, right? With Nico, who we'll do another video on and we'll talk about that. But with Nico, it's like, yeah, he's still 21, gonna be 22. Like, there's a lot of meat still on the bone to think about development. With Jaime, it's like, yeah, you're gonna go into the year, you're gonna turn 25 in the middle of the year. That's Tyler's age. So it feels like there's this, like, your runway is shorter to think about, like, all right, you kind of are you who you are, or is there, and not only can they find that again of what you were, but is there any other extra elements you're gonna add to your game, or is this just kind of it for him? And it's just, you just look back at this year and you think about on the start of the season, and this is a Heat team that, had Jaime Jaquez Jr. as thought of as, like, one of their top guys off the bench. And it just goes to an afterthought, and then, Jimmy and Terry Rozier, who, I mean, obviously just fell off the face of the earth. Like, a lot of these plans that the Heat constructed this roster with were, on hope, but there's no way. I don't think any front office could have predicted the year that Jaime had and what Terry showed when he was healthy. There's no way that the Heat could have envisioned that they were going to go to zeros on this team. The Jimmy stuff, like when people say about the Heat and they say the Jimmy stuff, like should they have seen that coming? I understand why you would say that. I think, they always say hindsight's 20/20. And sometimes it's kind of crap. It's like you couldn't have predicted that. And for the Heat, it's like with the Jimmy thing, I think there's deserved criticism that, you guys thought that this wasn't going to be an issue. Like, I think that that's deserved. Jaime Jaquez Jr. becoming like unplayable and Terry Rozier becoming a ghost. I don't know how you predict that. And it's clear, Miami's got to at least get him to a point where if they don't think he's going to be a piece, they got to think that he's valuable. And I don't know if that is going to be the case because, look, some guys don't get it back. I think, if you were to ask Heat fans, I would say Justice Winslow, his best year was his rookie year, and he just never was really that guy again. There were moments we could always have the points, and I remember the Justice Better stuff from Heat Twitter and all that, but like he never really got to the point of promise. And the difference between Justice and Jaime is Justice was 19. He had 1 year in college. So I don't know if that even puts an even bleaker outlook on Jaime as far as what that's going to be concerned. But whatever changes he thinks he needs to make, yeah, he probably should get in the lab like immediately to get that right, because it feels like a real pivot point for his NBA career if it's going to be anything.